Welcome to the weirdest day on the calendar. The day before Christmas Eve. It's a Monday. It's December 30th. Everyone's put the hay in the barn. The year is over, and yet we still have to perform today as if this day is any other Monday for a lot of us. We're still going to give our best effort here. Don't worry. Sean Fitz and I are here to talk about Penn State, Boise State, and other things going on with Penn State football. The team is out in Arizona, so is half of our contingency from Blue White Illustrated. Fitz and I are staying back here to man the fort. So Fitz, thanks for being here on the show. How was your Christmas? How has everything been with you since the last time we talked?
It's been wonderful. It's been a nice little, I'd call it a break, but with Penn State playing tomorrow, that kind of changes some things. I did wake up this morning knowing which day it was. So that's a very, very big plus. Yeah. I mean, it's a big step from Friday when we were talking about being at practice and we thought it was Wednesday and Wednesday was Christmas. And hey, it's just, there's so much going on right now. And I'm happy to be in that haze. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, I'm back on the schedule. Although a Tuesday game is not something we had on our calendar or on our calendars to start the year, but again, we will take it very much. So we appreciate everybody following along, listening. Hopefully, we can get the word out that we're out here on Monday. Obviously, the Tuesday games messes up some schedules. T. Frank, I'm sure you'll have more information about when we'll be on this week.
I don't know yet.
I'm excited to hear it too. So yes, if we can get back to that, that'd be great. But no, we appreciate you guys following along. We'll try and send out a tweet here and make sure get our numbers up. So appreciate you following along, liking, subscribing, all that kind of stuff. And here to talk Boise State.
Yeah. I actually, up until, what was it, Friday, I didn't realize you were going to be here. So I was waiting on, I didn't know anyone's travel schedule, but yeah, things will be decided very quickly now as far as what's going on with our schedule for the next half of the week. Christian here in the chat says, birthday and game day tomorrow. Better get the win. Happy early birthday, Christian. Thanks for being here. And thank you for being a great subscriber over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Fitz, can you tell them how they can join Christian and us over there so people here that aren't can become a full-on Blue White Illustrated member?
Yeah, $1 for the first week. It is, a promo that a lot of people have jumped on, especially in the last couple of weeks. You want to know what's going on for bowl prep. You want to know what's going on in the portal. There's a lot to check us out. So check us out at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Hit the join page. You've got a couple of options there. There's a new ad-free tier that's I think people seem to like as well. Definitely join us because that's where the action happens. There's a lot that we can say on this show. There's probably more that we can't say on this show to get us there. So I hope everybody had a wonderful holiday, and I hope that you can cap that off with a new Blue White Illustrated subscription.
Yeah, I think even if it isn't, I always say if you're going to use lotto tickets as a throwaway gift for your coworkers, whether it's for Christmas Eve or maybe it's for the New Year, maybe you do gifts for New Year's Eve, get them something that actually will give them something in return guaranteed, which is subscription to talk about and learn about their favorite hobby, Penn State football, or their favorite obsession. Maybe it is what they, their lifeblood, whatever it might be, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. I'm very proud of the work these guys do, the leaders in Penn State football recruiting and, of course, Penn State football proper. So the team is out in Arizona. And we got to hear James Franklin talk for about 10 minutes before there was a breakout session, before everyone went to individual conversations with other players. You and I are obviously here, so we don't have the insight and the context of a Nate Bauer or a Greg Pickle who are out there talking to those players. But I was just wondering off the top, was there anything James Franklin said or anything you've read from our coverage that you found interesting over the last 24-ish hours?
I just love the narrative between the two teams. Is Boise's entire approach is, hey, you better respect us, and James Franklin's like, yeah, we do a lot. Like that's like a whole lot. It's just very funny because it just keeps digging into it, and it's really interesting to see how this approach goes, because the way that James Franklin and his team approaches games, and you've heard players talk about it, you've heard coaches talk about it, is the 1-0 mentality is actually a real thing. Like yes, I think it's a bit campy and it's a bit generic, but like they actually believe this and they actually live this and do this. So when you're talking about 8 teams left in a playoff, when you have potentially 3 more games left, I mean, you don't get to 2 and 3 without number 1. So I think Penn State taking this game very seriously. I think they look at the matchups and they see that there are some advantages that they should have, just like they had over SMU. And I think they press a little bit into those advantages, not necessarily press to make plays or not necessarily press to do things that is out of their typical form, but
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot that
Lean
they can
into
lean.
their tendencies. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I mean,
Lean into their
just
strengths.
hammer home. I mean,
Yeah.
so tendencies has like a double connotation to it. It's like, yes, predictability is one of those things, but also things that you do well for a reason. And I think when you take a look at a Power Five versus non-Power Four or whatever school right now, that's what you want to lean into is the strongest things that you can do because you have the bigger, stronger players. That's what you
Yeah.
look to lean into, and I think that that's what Penn State isn't shying away from. So I'm interested to see how that comes out. But I will say, very generic in terms of anything that has been put out there. I think the biggest wave yesterday was, hey, we've got packages for Ethan Grunkmeyer. It's just like, oh, I didn't even see that there. And like,
Perfect timing.
yeah, I hope they have a package for Grunkmeyer, and I hope it comes at 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter once again. I mean, that is a package to get up 30 points and then all of a sudden put your true freshman back up in. So yeah, I'm not quite buying that one. Decoy maybe. I think that there's a situation where that could call for it, but I just you're taking the ball out of your best player's hands. You're taking a guy off the field in that situation.
Yeah.
Like that's not me saying that that's what I'd like to see happen. I'm just saying if there is a way to get him on the field, maybe it's like, okay, well, this guy, we've heard he can throw the ball. He's not Sid Finch, but we've heard he can throw the ball pretty well and do some things athletically. So, you got to account for him while he's out there, I guess.
Yeah. I'm curious about what's the level of what's the differentiating factor of Drew Aller, a junior quarterback, versus Ethan Grunkmeyer, an athletic freshman in the run game. Like, is Ethan Grunkmeyer close enough to Bo Pribula, who was a good runner, but I don't think was hyper elusive or somebody who was a game-changing threat. He's a very good football player that can operate all those schemes and can hurt you with his legs. But when we're talking about like special qualities as a runner of elusiveness, power, size, any of those things, he was a lot of jack of all trades in that sense. Is Ethan Grunkmeyer a better option to run the football than Drew Aller? And that's where I'm curious. I don't really see the distinction, Fitz.
I mean, I go back to just, get your best guys on the field and don't mess around too much. Like we saw that with the teams that were not quite on Penn State's level throughout the season. And I'm not saying Boise State's not. I think they're a fantastic team. But you're seeing a situation where do you get too cute to do all these things, to go out of your way to get Bo into the game and go out of your way to get Grunk in the game? I don't think there's a need for that, other than, I guess, putting it on tape, which, that's kind of a fallback, right?
We're past that at this point. It's a playoff game. I don't know that you should be spending time and energy putting things on tape for Notre Dame or Georgia. But I think that the conversation, the interesting part of the conversation is he said that Sunday. And even if he wanted to cast doubt into Boise State's offensive or defensive coordinator's mind, isn't the game plan already set?
Yeah,
like they already know what they're going to be doing.
It's too late for that. And we've probably spent too much time talking about it as well. I mean, it's like how much of this is going to be a part of the game? Like I said, hopefully we see him in there kneeling the ball down at the end of the game.
Yeah, we're deconstructing a gingerbread house is what it feels like. It's not as what are we doing here? What do we have on the recruiting front? Because I know there's been some conversation with 2026 and players that were at the SMU game and following up with those players. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about from the recruiting aspect here of kind of the news and notes of Penn State football?
Yeah, I think first off, we link the recruiting aspect to the current team, and there's 9 true freshmen. I guess you don't even call them true freshmen, but 9 January enrollees that have joined the team to practice. I think that's interesting in a sense, is like, hey, it's a nice little crash course in how this goes in terms of practice structure. Because one of the biggest jumps that you make from high school to college is these practices are nothing like you're used to. Like there's periods and structure and all this kind of stuff. And some guys, you play in some big programs and there's obviously structure there, big high school programs, but when you get to college, it's completely different. So these guys, if they just get in for a week or 2, or maybe hopefully 3 weeks, that makes a big difference. So like you've got 9 guys that come in, and You can use them in a variety of ways. They're all wearing 00 right now. I think is kind of like a neon, like a sort of like a red jersey type thing. Like
Yeah.
don't hit the kids type thing. They definitely got
Yeah.
through physicals and everything like that. So they're all out there practicing. But at the same time, like these are high school kids out there running around with grown men, and that's not easy to do. So, but I think it's pretty cool. Penn State hasn't been able to do this in the past because you think about where we're at in the timeline. And Penn State's usually traveling to the bowl or New Year's Bowl or whatever on December 26th. These bowl trips are a little bit truncated because of the format right now. But you now have a little bit more time to get those guys acclimated, to get those guys in there. They can't play in the game. They can't do a ton for you on scout team. I mean, they technically can, but it's such a big jump for them to do so that you're asking a lot of those guys. So, but the benefit comes in the experience, and I think that's really cool for these 9 guys to get out there.
And it'll be interesting to watch how being involved this early changes anything for a player in the long run. Because all of these things are about exposure and repetition and the progress of mental growth in a lot of different ways. And if you're used to doing this and Penn State gets into a rhythm of playing this long, like these are some of the subtle institutional advantages that teams like Alabama, Clemson, that have gone to the college football playoff repeatedly, right. You get these institutional advantages. Even it's always competing in the margins. It's never like, oh, this is why Alabama always goes back. But when you start stacking these little things, they become big things over time.
Yeah, it starts from the work back from preseason camp. You get a guy that comes in maybe late for academics in July or something like that. Okay, the guys that came in June have a leg up on him. Well, the guys that come in June, the guys that came in January have a leg up on them because they got to go through spring practice. Now you just get a smaller leg up on everyone else just because you get in here and you get a chance to go through that way when they go out there in March. And, it's an adjustment for everybody, but that way when you go out there in March, you kind of have a understanding of the lay of the land.
Yeah, for sure. Today's show, we've got a lot of people who have supported this show to make it is what it is. Appreciate everyone here in the chat. But we also have our show sponsors as well. And I'm going to be doing this a little bit differently than normal because I asked Scott over at Rothrock Wood Project. I asked him, hey, can you send me some Penn State specific stuff of what you've done to show people what you can have if you're a Penn State fan? So normally I like to get this all presented and everything, but he sent this over like 15 minutes before the show. So I just wanted to show you can check out his Instagram to see these photos a little bit bigger. But if you are a Penn State super fan and you want some Penn State specific furniture, you want your house to scream, I'm a Penn State fan. He's done 2 Penn State fan caves. He's done a bunch of these river epoxy tables that are blue. Here's one of the bars they've created. I love this, walnut, looking super fancy, looking really nice. That's an awesome fan cave. And these trees that he's making the wood out of are also local trees. So not only is it Penn State specific in terms of you can have that blue in there, that Penn State blue in there, these are also part of the literal fabric of Center County and of State College. So if you want a Penn State coffee table, you want a Penn State dining table, you want a Penn State, I don't know if they do chairs, but you can have any of these things that you can see here on screen, any of these styles. Check it out, Rothrock Wood Project on Instagram. And you can also go to rothrockwoodproject.com. Check out the link in the description of the video. That looks so nice. Look at this thing.
Yeah, man. I've followed Scott for a long time, far before he was on with us as an advertiser. I've admired his work for a long time. It's awesome stuff. And if you see it up close, I've seen a few of these in person. Not my house, but I've seen a few of these in person, and they're as cool as they look. Social media probably doesn't do it justice. It's really cool stuff.
Yeah, and I found out once we were talking, we were next door neighbors for like a year. Didn't even know it. That was wild.
Very memorable, yes.
Well, we never once interacted, but I realized a little bit later when he's like, "Yeah, I used to live here," and I'm like, "No way." Also here, proudly sponsoring the Blue White Illustrated live show is Collegiate Athletic Travel. And I'm going to be just sharing a whole bunch of screens today because they finally have the packages up. And I understand there's a lot of people out there like, don't you jinx it. Don't you jinx it. But here's the thing. If you're going to make a big decision, you kind of want to do it before it's the last spur of the minute sort of situation. And if you are confident that Penn State is going to beat Boise State tomorrow and go on and play either Georgia or Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl, then pre-register, sign up right now. for the bowl trip. Now, if they don't win and they don't move on, like this stuff is refunded, right? So they're not going to just take your money and go off into the night. They've been a sponsor of this show in previous years. They've been around for 50 years. They're not going to be taking your money and like skedaddling. They've been around a while. People know where to find them. So here's what you're getting if Penn State wins and you sign up for the Collegiate Athletic Travel Trip. This is their website. You can go to athletictravel.com. Again, the description is in the video. You get a chartered flight to Florida, right now, either out of State College or Harrisburg, hotel accommodations, game tickets, and these are seaside properties that they're putting you up at. This is a vacation plus a football game. They take care of everything. Look at this. 3-night air package includes a whole bunch of stuff I'm not going to read, Fitz, because there's so much stuff there, including you get to have a chalk talk and breakfast with the staff of Blue White Illustrated. So you get to have a mini show just for you and the people that go on the trip with Collegiate Athletic Travel. Here are their rates, and you just hit click book now, and it'll take you to a different tab that I can't share right away, so I don't want to make it look even uglier than it is on the show. But you just click that book now. You either a new customer, returning customer, you put in your information, and then you're off to the races. So check out collegiateathletictravel.com right now. I'm sorry, athletictravel.com right now to pre-register for that. And even if you're not feeling confident, even if you're like, oh no, T. Frank, how dare you talk about what might happen in the future? Well, I think that being over-prepared is better than being under-prepared, which is why we've gotten off to such a great start on the show today, because I was so over-prepared for this show.
Yeah, that's also why I'm not in Phoenix, because I didn't book the flight when I thought it was like expensive, and then I saw what expensive was for Phoenix. So, but no, Nate and Greg are out there, and they are doing some good work. I think there's a James Franklin press conference coming up here in a few minutes. But yeah, it's a really cool opportunity. I have actually traveled with Collegiate Athletic Travel before on their charters, and they do it for you. It's great. You don't lose your way. You don't have to worry about all the little things like the transportation from the airport to the hotel. All that kind of stuff is taken care of, and it's really, really, really convenient for you. And like T. Frank said, it's a vacation with a football game. It does not get much better. And I will slip this in. I know we got another ad read, but I will slip this in. Nate talked to some guys yesterday, and this was the biggest thing coming out of Atlanta last year was all the opt-outs and everything like that. Well, with these games meaning something, these players want to play, and they are playing. I think Jalen Reed said if he was in the Pop-Tart Bowl, he wouldn't play. Great. But this one has some stakes attached to it. So it's not a situation where you're going and you don't know who you're going to see on the field. You're going to see all of your Nittany Lions on the field if you go to this one. And hopefully Penn State is in the position to travel to Miami in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and the good news for you and I, Fitz, is that we may not be in Arizona, but we are here to drink at Anti-Fragile whenever we want, and it's open. So why wouldn't you, right?
Exactly. It was open on Sunday when my wife and I went down. She said, "I need a cheesesteak," and I was like, "Okay, well, I guess I'll just kind of entertain
twist your arm about it."
We went down there, and actually Christian, whose birthday was earlier in the day, I saw he was down there earlier that day. I was hoping to make it as early as I can, but the kids' schedules did not quite align. But it's where my wife and I go when we need a little bit of time to ourselves. We actually sat upstairs on the couches, nice little area to either entertain friends, or we gave up our seats to a group that had like 4 toddlers, and they just turned it into a playpen. It was really great. So you can bring your kids here, and it's a really good atmosphere for that as well. So, but I love Anti-Fragile. I can't say enough about their beer. They've got a lot on tap right now. When I was in there the other day, they had a Pilsner, they had a Helles Lager, they had an Imperial Stout, which I thought was fantastic. They went with a West Coast. There's a couple of hazies. There's a pale ale. There's a lot of variety in what they have right now. So definitely, if you're a fan of beer, check that out. If you're not a fan of beer, they have hard kombucha. They have mixed drinks. My wife had a couple of their Pigeon Lady was the drink that she had. She really, really loved it. And then they've got non-alcoholic options as well. But go in, say hi to whoever's around you. And I actually do have an apology. We had a listener that stopped me on my way out the door and was like, "Hey, I love your podcast." I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome. Thank you." And like, we had about 10 minutes left in childcare, and I felt really bad because usually I'll stop and talk and whatever. And I kind of got, I don't want to say pulled out the door because my wife didn't pull me out the door. She laughed at me because she always laughs at me when people say, "Hey, I like your stuff." But that's a definite apology to the person that grabbed me on the way out the door the other day. But I am in there often. So if you do see me, say hi. If you are in there, try all the beer that you can try because it's really good stuff. It's also small batch stuff. So it's not a situation where you go in there and you're going to see the same draft list twice. That's what I love about it. I can always move around depending on the season, depending on, what's, I guess depending on whether or not I have to drive home as well. So that's
well, that's a big one. Yeah.
But no, it's an awesome spot. A lovely addition to State College in the last couple of years. They've done a wonderful job. And it's a place to be on weekends. It's also the place to be, just if you're stopping through town to grab a cheesesteak, grab lunch, whatever. It's a great spot. So I do encourage you to check it out.
Yep. And as always, if you are going to go to Rothrock Wood Project, or if you're going to book collegiate athletic travel, or go to Anti-Fragile, let them know you came from the BWI Live Show. We've already had people. I was talking to the owner of Collegiate Athletic Travel this morning. They've already had people that have come from us that have signed up. So it's not a crazy thing to do. All right, let's talk about it. Penn State and Boise State out at the Fiesta Bowl for a chance to move on to the Final Four in the college football playoff. So, Fitz, let's start with your opening preview of this game. What are your general thoughts about how this sets up for Penn State and for the game 7:30 tomorrow night?
I think our guy Robert kind of set me up perfectly. He's got a question here in the chat. It's like, who's got the advantage? Does Penn State playing last week give them the advantage over Boise, who was off for a long time? I think it does. And this is something that I've been thinking about for a couple of months now, is like those teams that get the top 4 spots, that get the bye. Yes, that's great, but all of a sudden you're taking out a rhythm. You think about how long that layoff was between Penn State's final game, the Big Ten championship game, and the first round of the playoffs. But yeah, they went from the Mountain West championship to not playing until December 31st. So that's quite a layoff. That's quite a change in, I want to say, strategy in terms of how you conserve your body, how you do all these different things in practice. And then you sort of got to ramp it back up. And we saw, Penn State started slow against SMU. I know they jumped out to a 21-0 lead, but there was an asterisk there. Right. A couple of them, Dom DeLuca and Tony Rojas. But yeah, I could definitely see that. Now, I will say with Boise, with the way that they play, with the way that they force feed Ashton Genty, that is something that can maybe help bridge the gap. It's not a situation of timing with receivers and things like that. When you just flat out run the football, it might be a little bit of an easier transition. So I'm very curious, not just with Boise State, but which of these top 4 seeds just comes out a bit lethargic, because that layoff is no joke.
Yeah. So there's 2 sides of that I'm super interested in, because the other part is the unknown. So the rust versus rest, but also they've had 3 weeks, which they can install whatever they want at that point in terms of, I've been grinding the film with Landon. We're going to have our tailgate show coming up tomorrow, 4:30. But what don't we know? What have they worked on that we haven't seen on film? Because even when there is not a lot of time between games, in situations like this, Penn State gets everyone's best shot. For as much as Penn State fans feel like they are not one of the top dogs in college football, and they're hitting on this glass ceiling, and they're the underdog in all these situations, from the way I've seen things play out, especially this year, they get everyone's best shot, and they get every wrinkle imaginable. Very few teams just come out and play what they play against Penn State. So when you have extra time, how much does a team like Boise State that's going to need those advantages, how much do they throw Penn State off their game because of what we haven't seen?
Yeah. And how much do they sort of coach extra on top of that in terms of, hey, Boise State's most famous play, obviously a trick play. That's not their identity. That's not their blood. But here at the same time, it's like, hey, you've got an opportunity where you're 10 and a half point dog right now. You're clearly the underdog once again. So pull out all the stops, do the water boy, it's the last game, can't hold nothing back type thing. So yeah, you got to be ready for that if you're Penn State. Like I said, but that's not the fabric of what they do. The fabric of what they do is they give the ball to Ashton Genty, and he's very, very good. It's
very good.
There's no getting around. There's no saying, he's got a good offensive line. He's got all this. He's a freaking awesome back. He's wonderful. And it's interesting. I just saw, actually the thing that you just pulled up, Genty versus Zane Durant. Yeah. It's not it. It's Genty versus about 4 or 5 Nittany Lions. That's going to be the key right now. The gang tackling aspect of it, the wrangling him, getting him back inside, and then, not missing those tackles. And missed tackles are going to be something that pop up on Tuesday. Yes, Tuesday. And it's going to go both ways, because Penn State, for whatever you think Penn State is as a tackling team, and I know Penn State fans don't think Penn State's a good tackling team, Boise's worse. They are the worst. They are the worst. Yes. And that's not, that is a statistical analysis. That's not an opinion. They miss a lot of tackles. They get a lot of tackles for loss. They get, they do some really good things up front, but at the same time, when you break through into that secondary, that's a group that misses a lot of tackles, and that's playing in the Mountain West too. So it's a bit different of the athlete that you're going to see. So if they can't tackle Nick Singleton and Tyler Warren, just past that first wall, that's going to make for some potential for Penn State to break some plays.
Yeah, I think that is an underrated aspect in this game. But let's circle back and let's talk about that defensive matchup against Ashton Jeanty and what the Boise State wants to do and some of the pain points where Penn State's going to have to be good. I think you mentioned something really important there in tackles for loss, talking about the Boise State defense. Tom Allen compared Ashton Jeanty to Derrick Henry. And he said, he acknowledged, different size, taller guy, but it's the ability to bring him down that is so hard. And it's the opposite problem where Ashton Jeanty is 5'9" and 215 pounds. The strike zone, as he called it, is so small where you're supposed to wrap around the midsection, the thighs. Good luck finding where his thighs are because the only thing you're going to hit are his shoulder pads. Getting him down before he starts has been the most successful way to defend Ashton Jeanty. When you get tackles for loss, and I broke this down yesterday at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, some of the ways they can go about doing this, but the goal, I think, to me, referencing Zane Durant there, but any of the defensive line is to just win your blocks up front. Be that Power 5 team that is bigger, faster, stronger up front than a Boise State offensive line that is good at one thing, which is run blocking, but there are some significant holes within the offensive line and then the profile. So I guess, do you think that what's the level of mitigation you're expecting, or do you think is necessary for Penn State to be in command of the game?
Yeah, I think you see more 4-3 than 4-2-5. I think Dom, played his way back into a regular rotation, so you kind of feel comfortable with that, and you don't feel like the guys outside are going to beat you. They've had some big plays through the passing game, but it's some of those are missed tackles and broken for big gains. But yeah, I mean, you look at what they love to do is just force feed. I mean, it's kind of the same situation Penn State had with Saquon years ago. Congratulations to Saquon for 2,000 yards, by the way. But it's short run, tackle for loss, all this kind of thing. And then boom, he's gone. And that's the thing that, you need to avoid. You need to keep a lid on him. I think he's going to get his yards. I don't know that that means he's going to get 200 yards, but he has not been held under 100 yards this year. He might carry the ball 35 times this week. I mean, that is just the scenario. But if you can limit him to 150 yards on 35 carries, you're feeling pretty good about yourself. So it's so tough because he is so good, and you hate to call it a one-man show because it never is. But a lot of the things he gets on his own. So Penn State, it's a situation where Penn State's biggest vulnerabilities, and they only gave up one 100-yard rusher this year. That was Woody Marks at USC, but has been on the cutback and filling in those backside lanes. And that's really, that's not the entire story to me, but that's so huge for Penn State is to, sort of make him change direction and then finish. And there's been times when they haven't finished, but they did pretty well last week or 2 weeks ago or whenever it was against SMU. So I think that they kind of overcompensate for that, load the box a little bit more, move Abdul Carter around a little bit. I've been saying he's a defensive end for a long time, but he's your most important chess piece, and you can move him around and make some things work with that. So yes, I do think that they account for that by pseudo loading the box. You feel good. It's one of those things, if you can get home with 4, you're gonna try and do that all you can to help.
Here's my concern with loading the box, as Cliff says. Cliff says, load the box and dare Boise State to throw? ? Yes, I think that is part of the plan, but there's 2 issues with that. First off, in the passing game, you can't play just man coverage the entire time. So if you're going to load the box, usually that means 1 deep free safety. And then the only other thing you can play is cover 3. And Max Madsen, when he's seen those single high coverages, he's much better against cover 3 than he is against any other coverage, because what they do is they run quick game, they run stop routes, and they just eat up those underneath yards. The short passing game is oxygen to this offense. And that's the part that I think is tricky, because if you allow them to get those short passes and completions and set them up and get them into even 3rd and 5, Jeanty is a running threat on that 3rd down. And then the other thing is, if you load the box and you're aggressive, now you've got 1 deep free safety in case all hell breaks loose and he gets outside. So the closer you are, the tighter your angles are to the edges, and the better a chance he has to break those and then get a big play. So I think you have to be careful about getting too close to the line of scrimmage, because that's when the big plays happen. And you want to make sure you selectively are aggressive with your personnel. And like you just said there before I cut you off, winning with 4 would be the best opportunity for Penn State, but you're not going to win every single play. We've got a Boise State fan in the chat. I slightly disagree that they've got 2 NFL offensive linemen. I think they've got some good football players, but across the 5, there are not 5 players up front that should stop Penn State's defensive line the entire game.
Yeah, and what I was getting to with if you can rush with 4, if you can defend with 6, like if you can play your 4 down linemen, your 2 linebackers behind them, and you can actually be effective, like that just frees up everything. Like that makes it was more the concept of, if you can get home with 4, just rush with 4. But if you have to bring in a 5th and a 6th rusher, then all of a sudden you're going to exploit yourself in the back end. If Penn State can play its base defense, which I don't know that they can, but if they can play their base defense, I think that's a huge chip for Tom Allen to work with.
Oh, for sure. For sure. When it comes to the passing game, because Madsen isn't fully a sidecar on this show. Like, he does contribute to the offense. They do have some. I was surprised at how big their receivers are. Do you think that's intentional, or is that just how it worked out, where you go get the best receivers you can find, and they got a 6'5" and I think a 6'3" receiver on the outside?
I'm sure it's a little bit of both. I mean, you look at, hey, if this guy can eventually develop into what we think they do, and they keep a lot of guys around, and they develop a lot of guys from freshmen to eventually when they get on the field, like that's a huge thing for them. And that's always been sort of the backbone of their program, is those older guys that come through and really shine by the time that they are physically mature and all that. So I think that's part of it. Those 6'3", those 6'5" guys usually aren't going to come in ready made. So, you for lack of a better term, stash and develop. And they've done a really good job at that.
Yeah. From the passing game, I guess, where do you think Penn State can either take advantage of, or where do you think they need to be aware of what's coming when they're focusing so much on the ground game?
Yeah, I think Tyler Warren. Wait, are we talking Penn State passing or
the Boise State passing game? And passing game. Playing off of Genty.
Yeah, that pass rush, man. It's the same sort of formula that you had for SMU, is you get them off schedule, maybe even put them behind a little bit. They don't really get away from the run. They haven't had to, number one, because I think the biggest deficit was 14. Is that correct? San
Jose State at the beginning of the second quarter, Boise State scored a touchdown and had it tied by halftime. So they have never gotten off their game script all year long.
And San Jose State, I believe, had a 4th and goal from the 2 and did not get it to go up 21-0. And that turned everything. And then all of a sudden you can go back to Genty, you can go back to running the football. And that's really, they've played with fire a few times in terms of close games with lesser opponents, but at the same time, they haven't had to get away from their true identity. And, that's the blueprint for any team, is playoff or whatever, is you make them get away from what they do best. And all of a sudden that's when your pass rush can take over. So I think that's the opportunity that they have. Penn State, with the reinforcements that it has up front, with Amin Vanover, with Smith Vilbert, with those other defensive, I guess the one other defensive tackle, Keziah Izzard, who played really well against SMU. Hey, they were deep at one point. I promise you they were deep at one point. But if you can flush those guys back through there, and they're going to have to do so, because obviously Boise is going to try and run at them, have an opportunity to come back and get some sacks. So really aggressive fronts on both sides this week. And I'm excited to see how sort of the offensive coordinators on each side sort of counteract that.
The 49er, how many screen passes? He really wants Tyler Warren to be a 49er, which feels redundant to have 2 George Kittles on the same team. But I mean, I guess why not? How many screen passes to Genty do you think? Fitz, this is a super interesting aspect of their offense, where because so much of their offense is built off of the threat of Ashton Genty, it's kind of hard to get him the ball in the passing game. They throw some bubble screens to him. They throw some screens to him, but generally it seems like when they are throwing, it's play action and intermediate to deep shots off of the threat of him running the football. And if they go to their pure passing game, it's more of a, kind of a dink and dunk spread offense. So do you think in terms of wrinkles in the game, is that something you could see more of, maybe less running and more throwing to him?
Maybe, but like that one caught me off guard, because I was like, I don't remember seeing much on film in terms of him being a receiver. He got 20 catches in 13 games, 5.8 yards per catch and a touchdown. So like, that's not what they've leaned on this year. I don't know if that's out of necessity or whatever, but if they get down big, obviously you want to get you want to get the ball in your hands of your best playmaker. That's a way to do it. I have no doubt that they have that in the playbook, but it's just not something they've gone to very often. But again, would not be surprised if he gets 40 touches, and if that's a way to get him 240, like that's where you're at. So I think that's you look at what's out there, and it's kind of similar to Penn State. You've got a couple of guys that they sort of concentrate targets to. The average yards per attempt is a little bit lower, but that's I think Penn State's up in the higher echelon in terms of college football with that. So it's not a big difference. But I mean, just have a key on number 2 the entire time. There's nothing special about what they do.
It's a very basic game plan, right?
It is. And again, it sounds disrespectful to the other guys, but like the other guys were not in New York for the Heisman ceremony. Like there's a big difference here. You look at what Penn State does defensively, and they lean a lot on speed. We can talk about the tackling issues, obviously, but they lean a lot on speed, and they lean a lot on, sort of making up for that extra blocker, that extra defender by having that extra guy come from the backside. And that's going to be key, man. That's going to be key. You can't get crossed up, and you can't get cut back on. And when you do, you got to put the wood to them. So that's kind of where I'm standing with that. It's just we could sit here and talk for an hour, and I don't think we're going to cover much more than, hey, you need to know where number 2 is on every play, because he's going to get the football.
Last thing I'll say is 2 players that I think are very important to maybe some of the pain points for Penn State: Kobe King and Denai Dennis-Sutton. If there have been times that Penn State has allowed players to get outside of contain, it's when Denai Dennis-Sutton is out in the field and he's got to stop somebody from getting outside of him. And sometimes if he's not exactly in the perfect position, guys can bubble over the top. And Ashton Genty, that's what he does, is he bubbles over the top. He breaks outside when he needs to. And then if you're in single coverage, because here's the thing, you can play man coverage across the board. Somebody's got to have Ashton Genty as a single coverage player, whoever that may be. At some point, it may be Kobe King. And that speed differential, that ability to play in space, Kobe is much better than he was early in his career. But athlete to athlete, that would make me very nervous. I think any individual athlete would make me very nervous. But that one we've seen, I guess this is the thing. Like Jordan James got outside of Penn State and Kobe King had to chase him down, and that didn't go very well. So when you're talking about really good running back speed on speed, that's an area where I think those 2 players making sure that they have support and help, I think, is critical in space.
Absolutely. I think it's a team. I mean, this is not an individual performance type game. I think this is a total team effort game. And if you've got the ability to bring him down with 3 guys, your tackle percentage goes way up than one-on-one in the open field. So, I mean, again, this is one of the more basic games that we've covered, not because of the opponent, but like because of what they like to do and what Penn State needs to do. And it seems pretty, obviously easier said than done, but it seems pretty simple about what where you sort of put that wedge in.
Yeah. The good thing we saved this side for the last, because I do think there's an interesting couple of different ways that this could go for the Penn State offense versus the Boise State defense. So first off, what have you seen from Boise State, and how do you think Penn State attacks this particular unit that is I think, a very interesting study on film?
It's tough because they fluctuate a lot from game to game in terms of what they, not so much what they do, but just how they perform. They got a ton of guys with tackles for loss. I think they have 107, and I'm in the ballpark there. I have questions about how they're going to handle things after the first wave. Like that is my big thing. You look at the defensive backs, you look at the linebackers, and those guys can play, but like it's a different level, I think, and it's a different ask to sort of go out there. And again, Nick Singleton has not been elusive whatsoever. I think he's looked much better since he's gotten healthy, but in terms of being elusive, that's not really his game. But I think this is a game you have an opportunity to break a tackle, and if you do, you might be running for a long time. So that's what I'm very curious to see with these guys, because I think Penn State's game plan is going to be similar to what it was against SMU, with the caveat of you're going to be in a climate controlled environment. Like that 20 degrees and windy made a big difference on how they called the game against SMU. You're going back into a dome. The last time you were in a dome, you played pretty well against Oregon. So it gives you a little bit of confidence in terms of spreading the ball a little bit more around the field. But you've got that other side that says, hey, give the ball to Katron, give the ball to Nick Singleton. see what happens, and then just dump it over the first wall to Tyler Warren. So
Yeah.
Tyler Warren had 3 catches against SMU. I'm going to take the over on that one. So I think they're
Yeah.
going to get him involved quite a bit on Tuesday.
It's an interesting defense because Ryan asks here, what's the real scoop on the Boise State D-line? Obviously, there is the conversation of how many sacks they've corralled this year. And I think that it is a compliment to the scheme and a compliment to the players that they are elite at executing this scheme. And that is also a talent. That is a talent from a physical and mental perspective, because it feels like they blitz all the time. And they don't actually blitz all the time. What they do is when they do blitz, they send the house. They send 6. So you're going to get overload pressures. You're going to get free runners at the quarterback. And to me, this is where the game hinges, because the offensive line did not do a great job against SMU and their pressure stunt packages, which are similar, but a little bit different to Boise State. But they're kind of in the same, we're going to make more with less. And we're going to not have the Abdul Carters and Zane Durants and just rush 4 and win. They're going to do more to tailor specific blitzes to get to the quarterback. The quarterback handled it great. The offensive line did not. So from a mental perspective, Drew Aller pre-snap and post-snap is a differentiator in this game. Getting out of pressures, throwing the ball quickly, knowing when he's hot, identifying and neutralizing those as much as possible. He's been so good at that. That's an underrated thing. The offensive line, if they give him time, that might be the game. Because when you blitz and you've got Tyler Warren or Nick Singleton or any of Penn State's receivers in space, it's a recipe for disaster. And that's something from that side.
You think back to the Big Ten championship game, and what did Penn State do? We really hadn't seen it much all year to sort of get Oregon's front 4 from just going straight up the field. They did that little toss play action. And it was so effective. It was so effective in just sort of keeping those guys not on their heels, but maybe toward the middle of their feet instead of on the front foot there. So I think that Penn State can do stuff like that to sort of slow down and mitigate what they're trying to do, and maybe get some luck on the edge on that toss. I hate that toss play, the shotgun, by the way, but that's just neither here nor there.
Are you talking about the shovel pass?
The shotgun straight toss, like in general. I don't know that I've seen it work, but that is a tangent that was not related to that at all. It's just I hate it so much. But the play action there is there for a reason, and I think that that's something that they can use against this front 4 to sort of maybe get them moving in a different direction, and then maybe you have an opportunity to not only sort of widen that rush, but also have Drew pull it down and run a little bit. So I think that gives you just a multifaceted threat that doesn't look like much, but it does do a little bit, and it really helped mitigate what Oregon did. So I think that that's a possibility. Now, the flip side of that is saying, hey, if you're a Big Ten team and you're playing a Mountain West team, why can't you just run the football? Just straight up, maybe throw a fullback, bring Cooper Cousins or Khalil Dinkins in there, throw a fullback. But I think that there's a value in sort of spreading them out a little bit, because that's when you get your athletes, especially your athletes in the middle of the field, which are your 2 running backs and your tight ends, which is your focus, and it should be. You get them more favorable matchups in that way.
Yeah, I think that part of the answer is because scheme, you can overcome talent if you can anticipate and beat the scheme. So it doesn't matter how good you are usually, if the opponent has an idea of where you're going to go and what you're going to do, they have enough speed and athleticism and football intelligence to get to the point of attack before you do. So you do need to have those moments of hesitation, making them think, and then steamrolling them. That's kind of Kotelnicki's special as well. There's another aspect of it. I think you got something you wanted to chop.
Yeah, and Paul kind of said it in the chat where I was moving here is like the Penn State has gone to unbalanced. They've gone to 12 and 13 personnel. They've done a lot of things to make themselves bigger, and I think that they can do that once again. But that's kind of the beauty of this, right? The beauty of this offense is you can make those adjustments, and you can play. I mean, you can play 12 personnel and it looks like 11 personnel. I mean, that's not it's not a problem that they've had. And when you talk about tempo, when you talk about trying to wear down a smaller opponent, you've got an opportunity to get those guys in and out without not get those guys in and out, but you have an opportunity to change your personnel alignment and groupings by keeping the same players on the field. That's invaluable for a guy, for a program that wants to run tempo at times. And I think that can be certainly something that you look for on Tuesday.
Yeah. The other aspect of this from the passing attack that I find interesting is this is not a great schematic matchup for Boise State, because their general plan of attack is to be hyper aggressive when they are hyper aggressive, but then play kind of a shell defense and rally to the football. Again, it feels Big 12 adjacent. And this one, I think a little bit more than SMU really is, because they play quarters more than anything. And I looked this up, Fitz. I wrote this in a premium article last week. I'll just share this nugget here with you if you want to go read the full thing, bluewhiteillustrated.com. Another reminder here, there's a bunch more people here on the show. If you want to subscribe, it's just $1. And you get access to all of our premium content, film breakdowns, reporting, transfer portal, recruiting, all of it. Everybody out in that's gathering notes and intel right now out in Arizona, you get all of that just for $1. And then, of course, if you want to join us for a full year, you can decide at the end of a week whether we're worth it. I promise you, if you do, you're going to be hooked. Boise State has run quarters more than anything else this year, which is 4 high defenders, 2 safeties, 2 corners, typically how it works. Drew Aller has 5 of his 8 deep touchdowns, and I want to say 250 to 300 yards against quarters. It's almost as the entire diet of his deep passing attack. When they get the matchups they want and you get a base call, that's a real danger. And if that hits in this game, we've seen it hit selectively. Minnesota hit selectively. But when it does, I don't know that Boise State can keep up if both sides of the ball are humming for Penn State, whether it's the run game and the passing game for the Nittany Lions. Because like we said, they haven't been able to produce a complete game from run and pass really predominantly this year. If this is the game, this is the game to do it, because all the ingredients are there.
I agree. And you look at some of the success that these receivers have had, and I know that they're much maligned here, but at the same time, they've had. I mean, they're part of that quarter success as well. So
yeah,
again, I think it's a lot of Tyler Warren and the supporting cast. I mean, it kind of is what it is at this point. But Trey Wallace has been a guy that's been dependable, and his season is not defined by one play before halftime at Ohio State. I think he's done some really nice things in terms of evolving to a more well-rounded receiver, but also you still want to see his ceiling, which I don't think we've seen yet.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And part of that is the opportunities. You mentioned that one play before Ohio State where it is the, I guess the jump ball opportunities, a thing that I feel like he should be really good at given his athletic profile, that we haven't seen a lot of opportunities for him. Anything left on the offense before we get to our game predictions and final score?
No, I think they've got an opportunity here. Somebody called a Khalil Dinkins game in the chat, and I'm always up for a Khalil Dinkins game. So hopefully he gets in the end zone this week. But no, I mean, I think Penn State's got a real opportunity here because a lot of the things that they like to do match up well. And again, you put them in a climate-controlled environment, and I think that does make a difference. A lot of people making a lot of assumptions based on the SMU game, based on poor conditions in the Maryland game as well. But I think that they found something there. And I hate to use the turning the corner cliche, but like you look at the functioning of this offense in the last couple of weeks, and it's been much better.
Steven here, he gives us some compliments, so of course I'm going to read them. He says, again, thanks for all the great coverage, hitting it hard through the holidays. We've been trying to keep the lights on and keep everything up to steam because it is Christmas and people are out of their rhythm, but it's also lead up to a college football playoff game. And Larry says Boise State defense is either feast or famine, not good thing in his opinion at all. I think that's a great way to phrase what they do because, yeah, they attack. Even in the run game, one of the reasons it feels like they blitz all the time is because those linebackers are so aggressive coming downhill. And that's just them playing the run, not necessarily always run blitzing or throwing against the pass. So I think that's a good way to phrase that from Larry. If you want to get your game predictions here in the chat, we'll throw them here on the final as we get into our predictions of the game. And as always, if you're listening on the podcast version, I love you guys. Please, if you're on Apple Podcasts, give us a rating or review, 5 stars, give a comment, any of those things. The interaction helps us grow our podcast audience and grow everything on that side as well. This is designed to be a YouTube show, like to be a TV show with the graphics and the highlights and all those things, but it is absolutely a conversation. And we're not ignoring you guys on the podcast. We always appreciate you being there. Fitz, how do you think this plays out? And what's your final score prediction?
That is a good question. But while I do that, I'm going to filibuster here and say Stacey Collins coaches these Boise State special teams. You didn't ask me about that.
I did not.
I love Stacey. Everybody that's around Stacey loves Stacey. I mean, there's no getting around it. He's one of the coolest guys that has come through here. And his S&P Plus has Boise State's special teams at 69th overall. which isn't great, but Penn State's 81st. So like, I don't think this is a matchup where special teams is the be all end all of the game, but obviously it can have a factor in any way. Zion Tracy returning punts. That might be just one to keep an eye on. I'm just very curious. I'm looking for our predictions here.
Don't worry, I've got a graphic for you.
You got a graphic for me? Perfect. There it is. Penn State 38, SMU 24. I think Genty gets his yards. I think he does a really, does what he does, and that's get the ball a lot and turn it into positive momentum. I would not be shocked if he broke a long one. Like, that is just the way that his game plays out. He's a fantastic player. He was in New York for a reason, and they're going to be, just sort of keeping an eye on him all day. I do think that Penn State has the opportunity to score points. I think they've had the opportunity to make big plays, to bust a couple of runs, which have been kind of few and far between this year. So I'm excited to see how Penn State makes things work. Again, how do you sort of get away from what you were down the stretch with not force feeding Bo, but making Bo a part of that offense? How does that change? How does that mean more direct snaps to running backs? Does that mean more direct Tyler Warren work? I think we see a lot of Tyler Warren. I think we see a lot of sort of that creativity that gets results more so than the creativity that, gets people all, flustered mess in the post-game show. But no, I like Penn State. That's a lot of points, man, for a national quarterfinal game. 11 points or 10.5 points or whatever it is. That's a lot of points, but I think Penn State has the ability to get that done. Now, I will say this. I'm a bit worried that the national pundits are so on Penn State's side here. Like, if you look, it's almost unanimous what they think is going to happen. And you think about West Virginia, you think about some of these other games, and they aren't typically unanimously right. So I think I'm a little bit worried about that. But at the same time, Penn State's got a real opportunity ahead of them. Genty will get his, but at the same time, I think Penn State has a lot of weapons to lean back on both sides of the ball.
Everyone is predicting 30s or more for the Penn State offense in this game here in the chat. I won't read all through all of them here. Steven makes me laugh. He says, my prediction is whatever T. Frank says. Oh, that is not a great, that hasn't always worked out. Let's just say that. My prediction is 35-21. Penn State beats SMU. Yeah, that's good. It's the end of the year. So 35, what did I say? 35-21 Penn State. I think that in this particular game, in this situation, part of the mathematics is going to come down to Penn State's ability, as we said, to get out to a fast start and then be able to mitigate Ashton Genty. Now, I did some of some of my research, some of my stats and numbers. When he is held in check with some different things that Penn State can do schematically, that's 34 carries for 144 yards. So it's still 4.1 yards a carry. He's still a very good running back. So if he gets over 100 yards, he gets close to, 135. And if that's all of their offense, okay. So Penn State fans, you're going to have to ride it out. That's going to be the thing. And I don't know that Penn State's going to start fast, because I do expect Boise State to avoid doing the things that are kind of the kill switch. I don't expect them to run a lot of quarters. I don't expect them to run the same blitzes that we've seen. There's going to be new blitzes that catches Penn State off guard. And as James Franklin and its coaching staff always say, you've got to follow your rules at that point. And the difference maker, and I'll just say this again, the difference maker here is Drew Aller, the mental quarterback, who can navigate those waters and not make mistakes. Even if he doesn't hit a ton of the deep balls and he is able to keep the offense on schedule, keep them winning, this is survive and advance. Everyone wants to see the complete game, the blowout, the we are going to be national champions sort of statement moment. But at the same time, it doesn't matter if they don't get that, because they still get the opportunity to go play another game. And they get another opportunity to find a way to tap dance through the lava to find their way to the championship game. Like they have been able to, in most games, put together a competitive performance and win more times than not, even though it doesn't feel like that. Fitz, there's another thing I was thinking about today. There is a significant portion of people, especially in the YouTube comment section. And I know we deal with some of these people, even at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, the people that are all in, that don't believe it. They don't believe. They want to believe it, see it before they'll believe it. If Penn State wins this game, they're in the Final Four. As if there were no 12-team playoff, they've made the inner circle. So if they win this game, they're in. This is it. This is the thing that over the last 10 years, you were hoping for Penn State to get to. So I guess that, to me, the stakes of beating Boise State or not, and the quality of the opponent, whatever you think about that, if they win the game, there are no more yeah buts. They're there. They've made it.
Yeah. I mean, the goalposts are not permanent for some people. So like, you're not going to convince everybody, but yeah, it's a huge game. Absolutely huge game. And yes, that is the ultimate goal. Penn State as the sixth seed, fourth ranked, whatever that means. Like that's where they projected them to be. So I'm curious to see how this all plays out. Again, I think that's big picture stuff for another shorter red-faced guy that can talk about all that kind of stuff. But to me, I'm excited in the game. I'm excited to see it happen. I'm also excited because Boise, you're going to have to turn Boise and make them do some things they haven't done this year. And by that, I mean, they've only lost 4 fumbles. They've only thrown 4 interceptions. They've only given up 12 sacks. I think Penn State has the opportunity to be the best defense they've seen all year and move those numbers up a little bit. So I'm very curious to see how that goes. But yeah, I mean, for the big picture stuff, yes, it's a huge game. I don't care that it's a non-power 4 team. It's a fantastic team. It is a really, really probably the best individual player you'll see all year if you're a Penn State fan on the other sideline. So I'm very excited to see this game.
All right, we'll be breaking that down one more time. You're going to hear me repeat a lot of my comments here, but you hear Landon Tengwall say them in a different way. Coming up tomorrow on the Penn State Tailgate Show, that is airing at 4:30 here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, of course, locally on the radio, and we'll have that up for you so you can listen and discuss the game even further, get into your tailgate routine, and of course, we'll be live for the post-game show. That's coming up all tomorrow, a Tuesday, the New Year's Eve. It's all at the same time.
A New Year's Eve post-game show at like 11 o'clock. I'm sure the numbers are going to be great. And you're going to watch the ball drop with us, maybe. We'll see.
Yeah. Just, when I was a kid, I thought the ball dropping was actually somebody dropping a ball, like the crystal ball, off the Empire State Building. Like it would shatter at the bottom. And it was when I saw it, and it was just like going so slowly. I've never been more disappointed in my life than when it was just like, that was it. So this is way more entertaining. Like, we're going to be way more entertaining than watching a giant crystal ball in New York City slowly descend as if it were on one of those old person elevators that put on stairs so that you can get up and down in your house. Anyway, before I say anything else stupid, let's get going. We'll talk to you later.